Hey everyone, Mad Dragon here. You know, in today's world, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the news. It's like a never-ending stream of elections, policies, and protests. But here's the thing. Understanding the systems that govern us is more important than ever. Whether you're voting, engaging in debates, or just trying to make sense of the headlines, having a grasp of key political terms can be incredibly empowering. So in this video, we're going to dive into some essential political vocabulary that will help you navigate the complexities of power, governance, and political discourse. Let's start with a term often mentioned with foreboding: oligarchy. It's a system where a small elite group holds all the power. Think of it like a country club controlling the military and taxes. You probably can't join their club. The ruling group is usually wealthy and powerful. They hold key positions or control major industries. The average person has very little say. Their voices are drowned out by the elite few. Next up, we have a system that might conjure images of crowns, castles, and maybe a dragon or two: monarchy. A monarchy is a system of government where a single person, the monarch, holds supreme authority. Historically, monarchs were kings or queens, and their power was often passed down through generations, like a really valuable but slightly dusty heirloom. Now, while many monarchies today are largely ceremonial, think the UK, there are still absolute monarchies out there where the ruler has real, tangible power. Imagine having one person make all the decisions for an entire country. That's a lot of responsibility, and it can go really well or, not so well, depending on the ruler. Let's talk about a system without centralized power: anarchy. Anarchy means no governing body or hierarchy. Everyone is equal and free to make their own choices. But it often leads to chaos and instability. Without rules, maintaining order is tough. Alright, let's talk about a system that's a little less Mad Max, a little more Wall Street: plutocracy. In a plutocracy, wealth equals power. We're talking about a system where the richest individuals and corporations have a disproportionate influence on the government and its policies. Think of it like this. Imagine a seesaw where one side is piled high with gold bars, and the other side is, well, everyone else. It's not exactly a level playing field. In a plutocratic system, those with the most money can lobby for laws that benefit their interests, even if those laws might be detrimental to the majority of the population. It's like having a government that's more concerned with keeping the stock market happy than ensuring everyone has access to healthcare or affordable housing. Now, what if we took the reins of power away from politicians and handed them over to, say, scientists, engineers, and other technical experts? Well, my friends, that's the basic idea behind technocracy. The thinking goes something like this. If we want to solve complex problems like climate change or economic inequality, we need people with specialized knowledge and skills making the decisions. Imagine a world where policies are based on data analysis and scientific consensus, rather than political maneuvering or ideological agendas. It's a tempting idea, right? But technocracy has its critics too. Some argue that it's undemocratic to concentrate power in the hands of unelected experts, no matter how smart they might be. Others point out that even the smartest people can be biased or make mistakes. Alright, let's talk about a system that's just plain shady: kleptocracy. Now, the word klepto comes from the Greek word for thief, and that's pretty much the gist of it. A kleptocracy is a government run by corrupt leaders who use their positions to enrich themselves at the expense of the people they're supposed to be serving. It's like having a government that treats the national treasury like their own personal piggy bank. In a kleptocracy, public funds are siphoned off, contracts are awarded through bribery, and the rule of law is often ignored. It's a system where corruption is so deeply ingrained that it becomes almost impossible to root out. Alright, let's move on to a concept that sounds pretty good in theory: meritocracy. The basic idea is that power and positions of authority should be earned based on an individual's abilities, skills, and achievements, rather than their social status, wealth, or connections. In a meritocratic society, it wouldn't matter if you were born into a wealthy family or came from a marginalized community. What would matter is your talent, your hard work, and your contributions. Sounds fair, right? Well, here's where it gets tricky. In practice, creating a truly level playing field is incredibly difficult. Access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunity varies greatly depending on factors like race, gender, and socioeconomic background. So while the idea of a meritocracy is appealing, it can be challenging to implement in a way that's truly fair and equitable. Okay, let's dive into the world of economic and political ideologies with a term you've probably heard thrown around: neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is all about free markets, free trade, and limited government intervention in the economy. Think of it like this. Imagine a world where businesses operate with very few regulations, taxes are low, and international trade flows freely across borders. Proponents of neoliberalism argue that this approach leads to economic growth, innovation, and greater prosperity for all. However, critics argue that neoliberalism can exacerbate inequality, as the benefits of economic growth often flow to those who are already wealthy and powerful. Alright, let's talk about a political approach that's been gaining a lot of traction in recent years: populism. Populism, at its core, claims to represent the interests of the common people against a corrupt or out-of-touch elite. Populist leaders often portray themselves as outsiders, fighting against a system that's rigged against ordinary citizens. They use simple, emotionally charged language to connect with voters who feel ignored or left behind by traditional political parties. Now here's the thing about populism. It can be a powerful force for change, both for good and for bad. On the one hand, populist movements can challenge entrenched power structures, give a voice to marginalized groups, and demand greater accountability from leaders. On the other hand, populism can also be used to stoke division, undermine democratic institutions, and erode trust in facts and expertise. Okay, let's talk about a system that often gets a bad rap: bureaucracy. We've all been there, right? Stuck in line at a government office, filling out endless forms, navigating a maze of rules and regulations. Bureaucracy is all about the systems, procedures, and hierarchical structures that governments use to manage their affairs. It's about creating clear lines of authority, standardized processes, and a system of rules that apply to everyone. Now, while bureaucracy can sometimes feel impersonal or inefficient, it serves an important purpose: to ensure consistency, fairness, and accountability in government operations. Think of it like the operating system of a government. It might not be flashy or exciting, but it's essential for keeping things running smoothly. Alright, let's talk about a system that's all about balancing power: federalism. In a federal system, power is shared between a central government and regional or state governments. Think of it like a Venn diagram, where the central government has its own sphere of authority, the state governments have theirs, and there's an overlapping area where they share power. The idea behind federalism is to prevent any one level of government from becoming too powerful. It's about finding a balance between national unity and regional autonomy. Federalism allows for diversity in governance, as different states or regions can experiment with different policies and approaches. It also allows for greater citizen participation, as people have multiple levels of government to engage with. Okay, let's talk about a system where religion and government are deeply intertwined: theocracy. In a theocracy, religious leaders hold political power, and religious law is often the basis for the country's legal system. The line between religious authority and political authority becomes blurred, and religious doctrine often dictates government policy. Now, theocracies can vary widely in their interpretations of religious law and their approaches to governance. Some theocracies might be relatively tolerant and pluralistic, while others might be more rigid and authoritarian. The key point here is that in a theocracy, religion is not simply a matter of personal belief. It's a fundamental part of the state's identity and its exercise of power. Alright, we've reached our final term for today, and it's a bit of a doozy: autocracy. Autocracy is a system of government where a single person holds absolute power. We're talking about dictators, supreme leaders, emperors, rulers who have complete control. In an autocracy, there are no real checks and balances. Opposition is often suppressed, and dissent is silenced. Autocracies can arise through force or a coup. Sometimes a charismatic leader seizes power. Other times, power concentrates gradually. The key point is that people have very little say. Their freedoms are restricted, and their voices are silenced. So, there you have it, a crash course in essential political terms. Now, I know this was a lot to take in, but here's the thing. Understanding these concepts is crucial for navigating the complexities of our world. When we can identify different systems of governance, when we can recognize the language of power, we become more informed citizens, more critical thinkers, and more engaged participants in the political process. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep fighting for a more just and equitable world. These political terms are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding governance, power, and policy. Being informed about these concepts helps us participate more fully in political discourse and understand the systems that shape our world. Keep learning and stay engaged.